Paul. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Nice to see you.
Again, yeah, we're doing this one again. So Paul Vicary, I guess today, a very interesting fella, and he's ex-army, British Army guy, ex-special forces. We'll talk a bit about that. He's also a paramedic and a mental health fitness coach, as well as an author and a polar explorer, another one. Is that about covered it?
That's covered it, yeah. My head's just grown. No, it's not about me, it's about the listeners. So hopefully they could take something from our conversation. So thanks for that very kind intro.
Well, I've got a question I've been thinking about for the last couple of days, so I'll just rattle into it.
Oh, danger.
No, I think it's a good question. I was watching a thing about BUDS, and the BUDS training is what the US Navy SEALs do, and they claim that their program is the hardest in the world. What are your thoughts on that?
I've never heard of the BUTS. Is it BUTS training?
BUDS.
Oh,
what it means.
BUDS, not BUTS. That would be wrong, wouldn't it? Well, I mean, each force have got their own selection that's proven, and that's the US, and we've got our one, and actually they've taken quite a lot from our learnings as well to create their own special forces courses and things like that. So I think we can learn from each other. There's traits in all, but ultimately it's cultural, isn't it? We're different cultures, different breeds, but also we got to face what we got to face and do it effectively. But different forces do different things, and also they're a very large army. They're very well equipped. I'm not saying that we aren't, but we've got the good old British spirit, as you're well aware, that drives us to do some crazy things, which, you've just spoken about there. And it that's part of it as well, I think, you know what I mean? So, and also there's different branches within, the US. We get a bit confused with all the kind of SEAL teams, this and tier 1, tier 2. And so, we need to be aware that particularly, our special forces in particular focus, and they could be jack of all trades, master of none as such, and in any environment and doing all sorts of job roles. And we haven't got the resources so much, so it's a one-man, low resources, low manpower, but we get the job done and do the best we can. So, hopefully that's explained, but that hasn't,
Not really, no, because that's what I'm trying to get at. Who's got the toughest selection process?
Well, it's the toughest and this and that. Who's
got the bragging rights?
Quoted, from where I come from, the man is the regiment is the man. And that's what drives the successful kind of organisation anyway. You know what I mean? So, and you're only as good as your last success as such. So, you got to be careful who to say who's the best, the most elitist. You know what I mean? I don't think the elitist thing is right. Okay, and once again, coming from the ethos and values of my background, humility and humour is very important. So it's wrong to say who's best at what on this and that. So I just know that the British forces should be proud of what we've got, where we've come from, what we do. And yeah, that's all I'll say.
You should get a job as a diplomat.
I've been watching Boris.
All right. So you were a regular infantry. For how long did you do the regular infantry for?
Yeah, I mean, I joined straight from school, to be honest, at the age of 16, and I joined the infantry. It was actually the light infantry, what's now the rifles. That was about nearly 13, 14 years, and then I decided to go for a specialist selection procedure, and I was lucky and also prepared well, and I was successful and got into that and spent 22 years, which is ironic. Those who are aware out there of 22, and say no more on that. So I had a great career, roller coaster of a career, my ups and downs as you would in any job really. So, but so went off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, that's all right. Tangents on this podcast are very welcome, and we can go on any tangent, any rabbit hole you want. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, because I was asking. So you did 15 years with the regulars, and then you did 7 years special forces. Would that be right to say?
Well, no, I did 35 years in total, and 22 with special forces, and the rest was doing maths. So light infantry.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you did a long stint.
Yeah. And I think people get confused with the military, and they think that all you do is you've got your weapon and you're on the front line, or you're on your bed, but you get different job roles, and so I've been at the pointy end. I've been face to face with the enemy, quite literally. Been lucky to get out kind of alive and fairly uninjured. But and then again, I've been checking fire extinguishers, and I've done my diversity and inclusion courses. I've done, my event. I've run some events, some key events, and all sorts of bits and bobs. So I've got a whole variety of transferable skills, and that's the key thing. I think that soldiers and officers can bring definitely to the civilian market is that the power of transferable skills.
Yeah, because I guess what non-military people, or even guys that regular rank and file guys, don't realize that if you join as an officer, as I had the pleasure to do, most of it is spent behind a desk. I mean, that's, what I mean. There's a lot that you're doing, a lot of planning. There's a lot of, when I say sitting behind a desk, it's a lot of, a lot of mental work. You're trying to figure out plans, you're trying to figure out this and that and the other stuff. Yeah. And so it's not all kind of blood and thunder like people think. And because I remember when you become a captain, you get sent off to what's called a staff job, which is basically an office job, and it's you're not even with your regiment anymore. You go. Well, I went to the army headquarters, and it was depressing to say the least, because you go from having probably the best job, one of the best jobs in the army, as a platoon commander, and then you're sitting behind a desk doing something that just doesn't make any sense to you. And so I decided then and there that I was going to go for selection for special forces as well.
Wow. Oh, right.
Yeah. And then my boss, who was a Royal Marine, he took me in one day and he said, "Nicol, I know what you're doing. Look, it's only 2 years. Stick it out. I'll give you a good report and you'll be on your way."
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, fair enough.
And that sounds like selection in itself, to be honest, being there, and doing those. I've seen that side as well, so and can relate to that. And I think people working in London in those kind of high pressurized environments as well could, maybe relate to that as well. And it's crazy, But
you got to do lots of the fun stuff, though.
Yeah. I've done the kinetic piece, as I'd call it, and I've done the soft. I mean, it's a soft skills bit which I've taken, forward. Obviously, I'm not taking the kinetic stuff forward, but the soft skills I'm using and utilizing now, and developing my second career in the mental health and resilience and mental fitness coach piece you said. So, yeah.
Well, how did you get into that?
Wow, that's a long story. I think the key thing is you should always prepare, and by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail, aren't you? And I've done that with all my. That goes for selection, for going to the North and South Poles, and also for leaving the services. It's a big thing, joining any type of change or transition, and this is a serious one, isn't it? Is leaving the military, especially after I joined at the age of 16, totally indoctrinated, I would say. Brainwashed in a way, but in a positive light, and it's given me some great skills to take out. But it was that preparation and the skills I picked up, the paramedic piece, for example, and I was lucky to have specialised and honed those skills to that. And not many people get a chance to do that on your kind of some of the skills you get. You either get, to blow people up or put people back together again. And I was a lucky one to put people back together again, which is a great life skill. And that life skill I utilised not only on the streets, civilian streets and stuff, and helping people and doing all that good thing, life-saving stuff, to be honest. But I realised that training need as well, and I developed that, and I started with a kind of volunteer organisation locally, and they really, what I learned in the battlefield, I brought into the streets, and it's nighttime economy, to be honest. People who are intoxicated and looking after people. It's a similar hostile situation, the nighttime economy. So I just brought those skills in, I trained people on that, and they loved it. And I thought, there's something here. You know what I mean? And I really developed that, and they went forward and got some great awards and things, and that pushed me in the right direction. But as I was traveling that way, I realized, and some of the stuff I was doing, I was taking guys over the hills and things, and doing not only the physical preparation for that arduous course, it was the mental preparation. So I'd talk a bit about, coping strategies and ways to help you, the hidden stuff, the bit below the iceberg, hence my logo, covers that. But and it was that bit that really, I thought, there's something here. It's so important. I was very judgmental as a paramedic, looking at people and thinking, oh, that's a drunk person. They're going to get in my vehicle, or they're going to be sick. But actually, there's a reason why people are getting that state. They're like that. You walk past someone, oh, that's a druggie. Well, there's a reason why someone's taking drugs. There's a reason why. So I was being very judgmental. So I think the mental health piece really kind of was an area. This was quite before luckily it's got bigger now, hasn't it? We got more aware of it. I'm not saying we're in the right space at all, but we're tested all the time. But anyway, that's how I got into that kind of field, really. There's another part to that, but are you going to ask a question? No. Okay.
Well, I've got loads of questions, but I'm not going to ask it at the moment.
Okay. Well, so what actually happened was, so the medical bit was going really, really well, the bit above the iceberg. And the bit below the iceberg, I was developing and got fully trained and all that good stuff. And a guy came on board with me, and we kind of co-founded the company, and we drove it forward. And we were delivering some mental health training and consultancy to companies, and we weren't the usual provider, to be honest. You can imagine two guys we were from the same squadron, and we've been in the thick of it, quite literally, and our mental health and resilience has been tested. And the guy who was with, he'd been injured in service, and not only physically, but sadly psychologically, in a huge way. And his whole life journey and what we call voice of experience, he talked about, blew the socks off people. You could hear a pin drop. It was just so powerful to get the message across about mental health training. And that's what I do now. I co-facilitate training with someone else, and they tell their journey to get the message across, as well as all the other good stuff as well, activities and everything. But it's working. It's gone really well. Sadly, that co-founder, he struggled with his own mental health and had to take a step down. We're still very good mates. In fact, I was there today, helping him and stuff. So, but I've moved on forward, and we were tested with COVID, and God knows what. We had to go digital, and it's been a struggle. But we're there, and we're doing all right, and saving lives, and that's the main thing.
And what's the name of the company?
Oh, right, that's Excalibur Mental Health, and that's an X, and then #caliber, as in caliber of the person. So the people who deliver this have got the caliber to deliver it, because there's a lot of cowboys sadly out there who are delivering, and they don't know they've just done a course and that's it. There's no life experience, there's knowledge, skills, or experience. So I feel that we've got a lot to offer, and the feedback I'm getting is amazing, really. And
do you suffer at all yourself?
I've had some, I think we all are, to be honest, in one way or another. We can't compare one to another, and it's how we perceive things, where someone may get PTSD from a situation, a traumatic event, and there may be other people that don't, you know what I mean? So but from my side, I've had some struggles. Before I went for my selection process, I was going through a divorce, and that divorce, you could think as a kind of stress container, and it just spilled over in a roundabout way. And as you do, you look at places to cope, and I turned to alcohol to cope, coming, from maybe that sector as well, from the military. It's a strong culture. And I turned to that quite heavily, and all the badness of ways of coping to deal with my divorce was hard, it was tough. And I realized what I was doing, but I was in a vicious cycle. And I struggled a bit until someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, Vic, what are you doing? That's my nickname, by the way. What are you doing? And and then I went up to my room, and I'll be honest, I sulked. I wept, and I realised, what am I doing? And that next day, I realised I need to sort myself out. And luckily I had the power to empower myself to train and prepare for going for selection then. So I turned kind of the negative into a positive, but sadly people sometimes aren't in that space. They're not strong enough to be able to do that, and they need some help and support to get there. But I was lucky. So that's just one example. I've had numerous, I had young children, and saying goodbye to young children, it's hard, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
And so do you think in your own mind that the demon that drove you to alcohol also drove you to go to selection? Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing a lot of, kind of mental fitness coaching at the moment, and we go through some very dark times. We've probably watched that film Sliding Doors, and where, you could go one way or the other, and sometimes something very horrible happens, but it actually, there's an opportunity, or there's a light at the end of the tunnel that turns into a positive there. And so I think I'm a very much, very optimistic and always thinking that way, and things happen for a reason and all that type of thing. That's how I believe and think, and in a positive, try and turn it into a very positive light, to get out of probably a shit situation sometimes.
So when you were drinking, though, did you enjoy it? Were you having a good time, or did it get to the point where it wasn't fun anymore?
I'll be honest, it was all a bit of a blur, that period of time for me. I just realised I was, there was risky behaviour, there was discipline issues, there was all sorts of all those other things that I think, and for someone to tap me on the shoulder, I don't know who that was to this day, and I'm so thankful that person did, because it turned my life around, really, because it was not going down the pan, but it could have, so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can quite easily do that. In fact, I've kind of had the kind of realization just in the last couple of weeks that, because I liked, do you still drink? That's a good, ask you that.
Yeah. I had one before I came on. Not that drink, but, I'm not under the influence of alcohol at the moment. But if I want a drink, I'll have one, but not too, to extreme. But then I'll go out and might socialise. But yeah, I still do. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. No, I mean, there's no judgment there. I'm just saying I've taken a break myself. No, I just wasn't enjoying it so much. It's not. It became kind of like. I mean, it's difficult to. Well, you probably understand where I'm coming from. But it's something that becomes a habit, and it's not a good habit for me. And it took me quite a long time, to be honest, to realize that. But I mean, I had a couple of sips of champagne last night just because somebody opened a bottle of champagne, and you would kind of be rude not to. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And funnily enough, quite a few of my friends who were real party still are, but they've quit drinking as well. I mean, I'm not saying I'll never drink again. Yeah, I don't mean it like that. I'm just saying is that it seems to be a thing right now that people are just. Or it could be just the age you get to where you just think I'm not. Yeah, I think that's fulfilling my potential.
Yeah, I think there's also cultural, and sectors. And I mentioned the military, and there's other, I've been with other kind of forces, blue light services, and my word, we think we've got a drinking. You go to. I mean, let's look at the government. Say no more on that, but but it's a way of, people use it as a way of coping. And let's look at what happened with COVID, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, all the beer sales, started going, especially through the roof. I think the only thing that was left on the shelf was Corona, excuse the pun. But, but it was, people turned to that. And some of the training I've done and some top bosses have actually said they turned to it. And it became, as you mentioned there, it becomes habitual. And you've got to be very careful because it takes over. You know what I mean? And it becomes like, let's have a glass of wine tonight. And then the next night, and the next night, and then the bottle's gone. Then it's quite hard to get out of that. You know what I mean? So, I wouldn't say I was, I can't remember much, but I think people can relate to this. And a lot of people bounce back out. And we heard about post-traumatic stress disorder. We've heard of post-traumatic growth. And people grew through COVID and realized the damage they were doing. And then next thing, I've never seen so many people doing fitness and running out, and they got their own, training yards. I mean, I call mine the prison yard, by the way, but, I've got slam ball, TRX and all that, and do my own fitness. It's turning things and being aware of it. There's nothing wrong with having a drink. There's nothing wrong with having some bad food. It's fine. I mean, I like my Tyrrell's crisps, but it's having it within moderation. I think that's the key thing. I'm being aware of what you're doing to yourself, So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's a slippery slope, and you don't realize it until you're on it, and you're kind of going a little bit too fast, and then you try and stop, and then you think, I was quite enjoying that. And then I just had this realization not that long ago, to be honest, and I just thought, I'm not getting it's not as fun as it used to be.
Yeah.
Now, this weekend we've been out. This weekend I'm saying here in Switzerland. It's Thursday. Yesterday was a Catholic holiday, Ascension. So it was a bank holiday, and then today was a school holiday as well. So we went and had a fun time. We floated down the river, the Rhone River, and it was boiling hot, and everyone else around me was drinking.
Yeah.
And in the other parties, not necessarily my party, but I was just looking at them going, this is so much more fun when you're not drinking.
Yeah.
And it's a weird one, isn't it?
It's the bit afterwards, isn't it? It's the recovery the next day as well, But the heat, the sun, the good weather, it always brings it out, doesn't it? Yeah.
Just the first nice lunch when a nice cold bottle of wine comes out, and that's going to be the test. We'll see how we get on. That's going to be tomorrow as it happens.
Yeah, and it comes to willpower, as well, So let's remember this chat, eh? When that bottle of wine comes out, see.
Would you want to be my sponsor? So I just text you.
But enjoy.
Have a drink.
But there's nothing wrong with enjoying. So enjoy, have fun. If you feel like one, that's my take on things, But, I stopped drinking, when I went to, obviously the South Pole. Was out there for 3 months, and I didn't drink for 3 months out there. I didn't have any out, Well, we did take a little bottle of whiskey, but that didn't last very long, to be honest.
Well, that's understandable. The other thing is, and you'll know better than anyone, but yes, there is a drinking culture in the army. That's a given, right?
Yeah.
But we used to go on 6-month tours. So you'd go abroad somewhere for 6 months, wherever it was, whichever hotspot in the world was active at the time.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't touch a drop for 6 months. Yeah. And it was no problem at all. And in fact, the soldiers, some of the ones you think have got the drinking problems, they seem to be fine as well.
Yeah.
And there is the if you're a heavy drinker, just coming off it cold turkey can be it can be quite dangerous. So anyway, we kind of got.
As some of the guys mentioned, it's the monsters under your bed. They used to say there's monsters under your bed. But I mean, I'm relating this, to the military. The military now, I think. I think there's a better culture, as you're mentioning there, a realization. So I'm hoping that that culture's evaporated a bit. So yeah. So
let's go back to your Excalibur mental health aspect, because that's very interesting, very topical. And we discussed before. I have a neurologist who came on the podcast last year, and he said that he's never seen anything. He's basically dealing with people with problems all day, every day.
Yeah.
And he's I think might be a genius or something. He's a very smart guy. He's very kind of, what's the word?
The brain the size of a planet.
Yeah, and he reads all these papers and stuff. Yeah, he's one of these. He's like a boffin, but he's a super nice fella, but also good with it. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he's never seen anything like it during COVID, and he said his workload before was busy, and he said now it's crazy. And one of the things he's dealing with a lot is people who are contemplating suicide.
Yeah. It's scary, and what we've travelled through, with the COVID. I mean, it's day to day as well, and now the wave has kind of dissipated a bit, but we're now on another kind of wave, and we're paying the post COVID. It hasn't gone away. People are really struggling. And then we've got this, the our living cost of living and things. So all these added stresses. I mean, I'm only human, like everyone here. You know, I've done some extraordinary things. I'm tested daily, my stresses, you know, by things and the costs and things like that. So regardless of who you are, even the guys at the top, you know, it's lonely at the top. Even those top bosses, and sadly we've seen some top commanders from the military, you know, end their life, and that is scary. So it can affect any one of us, really, you know what I mean? And there are people at higher risk, you know, I talk about this in some of our, but let's just be aware of our team, our colleagues, our family members, and what they're traveling through. And what I mentioned that's earlier on about perception, what we perceive might be insignificant, might be actually really significant for them. You know, like if they're living alone and they lose a pet, you know, a cat or a dog, you know, that can be really significant. And as an example, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird, especially amongst us Brits, but I guess it's for probably most males, because the men are, well, certainly last time I looked, I don't know what it's like now, but men are certainly much more likely to end their lives.
Yeah.
And it's weird, it's like in their late teens, early 20s is a spike, and then it's kind of late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, so it's 45 to 49-year-olds in England, but in Scotland, it should be aware, it's lower. You know, I think it's in the 20s, late 20s, and then in Ireland it's in the 30s. So you know, we always hear that stat, so we should be aware of that as well. You know, and why is that? Why do males decide, you know, in that period of their life that's where it's happening, this spike? You know what I mean? And there's a whole raft of reasons which we're probably aware, the listeners are probably aware of, you know what I mean, is that we won't turn and get help. You know what I mean? My wife says to me, you know, go to the doctors, you know, I've left it 2 weeks now, go and see that, and I won't, you know, I'm that person who doesn't, but I should be. I know I should, but I don't, because, so, you know, if we don't get that help, it can manifest, as we mentioned, you know, earlier, it can really get worse and worse and worse, and especially if you come from certain sectors as well, you know, it's a sign, you know, it could be a sign of weakness, you know, for that individual. The stigma as well, you know, there's self-stigma, there's social stigma, and the sector that you might be working in, let's go for the military, you know what I mean, it won't turn to help. It could black mark a career, and it could drive someone that they don't get that help to eventually contemplate or even take their own lives, you know. So it's scary stuff, yeah. But let's be aware, you know, there's not just males. You know, there is, of course, there is a cohort also at the moment of younger girls as well. So we should be mindful of that.
Yeah, I've seen that. The thing is, I can't really relate to that. I mean, I'm not a young girl, and I do know a lot of people who have been affected by friends and family committing suicide. And it seems to be the common theme. We'll mention it anyway. It's always communication, and that people get into a hole and they feel like they've got no one to talk to. And then what I've noticed is after the event, people say to me, I just wish he just called me. I wish he just reached out to me. Yeah. And you know, I think we spoke about this before. You said that they do, but we just don't pick it up. And we're kind of bred into us not to, you don't complain. Well, that's not true. You complain, but you suck it up. That's basically it, isn't it? You have to suck it up.
It's hard to get our heads around how that person's thinking at that time. It's their only way out. You know, it's a very gloomy place. So it takes someone to pick up on those, what we would say, you know, I call them balloons of help, by the way. I look at the person, look around them, and look at their actions. What are they actually doing? Is there any like reckless behavior, chain smoking, disposing of good, you know, valuable items and things like that, setting themselves up, preparing, you know, what's their feelings like? What do they look like physically? You know, and what's their words is the biggest one. And you picked up on that, is communication. What are they telling you? Someone may come to you, and there's different forms of communication. Let's not just think, as we are now, we've got our Zoom here, or audio as you're listening to. You can imagine if someone, you know, the Samaritans, they pick up their phone, having that conversation where our body language changes to our tone, to our voice, and understand what they're actually telling you here. So you've got to have your Spock ears on to listen to what they're telling you. and that's what we do through our training, and we do suicide prevention training, and we focus wholeheartedly on that. But it comes to, there is an argument all suicides are preventable, and there's some horrible films out there, and there's one in particular, a guy called Kevin Hines. He jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge, but he survives. It's a great book, by the way. But he tells a story afterwards, and he does talks, and he's got the book out there. But his instant thing of actually jumping off was instant regret. And
is that right?
Yeah, and that's what he noticed. And he spoke to another 20 survivors, and they all said the same thing. So it's,
I'm not in the slightest bit surprised with that. But the other thing is, I was going to ask is, you're not actually speaking to these people directly, or you're training people who are then going to be speaking to people?
Yeah, I've been training people through our training. I've had some amazing feedback, and through our training we have saved lives, but I also work for Help for Heroes as a part-time. I'm a veterans liaison manager actually, and I'm also a case manager, and I've had some calls and spoken to some people who have contemplated, or they got suicidal emotions, and we need to be direct and ask them, how are they, so we're comfortable. But sadly, people do slip through the net, regardless of a charity or organisation, as we've seen. I think there's an average of about 6,000 in the UK a year that are recorded, by the way, are ending their life. And I'm not know the current stats, but it's scary. So
yeah. Is there anything in particular you're looking for in people if they want to come and do the training with you? Is there any particular skill set they need to have, or
no, just
along those lines?
Just come on, the training and embrace it. Really, I think, I set the scene. It's an emotional journey. Like I said, I also deliver medical training, high level and also first aid at work and all that business. And I come in with my dummies, to all my resources. But I also, from a mental health training, I go in with not much, but the discussions we have are unbelievable. It is very emotional. And I go away kind of taking this imaginary psychological baggage with me, and it's a very intensive course. But anyone could come on board, and I would, recommend, I'm not just saying that, go to any provider, not just Excalibur, but get some, education is key, awareness, because we are very blinkered. We're blinkered by what we're hearing, and this training might change your mindset to this, the stigma of mental health. And I think we're all pretty judgmental. The key words here is being non-judgmental, being empathy, having empathy, and listening to that person. That's the key things you need. Yeah. And
can people who come on your courses, do they then use that to make a career, as in a career earning money, or is it purely a volunteer thing afterwards?
It depends what we go to organisations, big, large, small, whatever, and we try and create a positive mental health culture. And all the benefits of that is reducing, absenteeism, staff turnover, attracting talent. This is my pitch, isn't it? So all those good things. But sadly, a lot of organisations do not do this, and they just see, they're worried about what they might unlock, and then not having the services to help the people. But we should be, because our NHS, here, maybe not in Switzerland, but are on their, dare I say it, bare ass, and they're struggling. And organisations need to have some form of organic, I would say, mental health support. I'm surprised it's not legislated, because you start me off on something here. We've got our first aiders, our nice boxes in our organisations, and we should have so many first aiders at work for physical first aid. But what about mental health first aid? There's nothing legislated, so we're just going to allow that to happen. So a lot of organisations, are embracing this, but some aren't, and people do slip through the net. And ultimately, it's about saving lives. Preserving life is the first, thing.
I just had a thought though. When you're talking about suicide, we were talking about suicide. When you leave, the people you leave behind are going to be very badly affected, which is going to damage their mental health.
Yeah.
If you're a first responder, be it police or ambulance service or whatever, and you turn up and someone's, whichever means they've decided to use to dispatch themselves, they got to go in and see that as well. You got to take that home, and then that's the other thing is, you can't discuss that with your wife and kids, can you? You can't, or your husband and kids. No. That's something that just doesn't come up, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to protect. You don't want your kids and your family to experience the horrors that you're experiencing. So you get to see how. Yeah. I mean, what you're doing is very noble.
Suicide has got a huge ripple effect, to any organisation. I think there's an average about 20 people it can affect for each person. And then, like you said, those, responders who are exposed constantly to witnessing these events, it's going to have an effect. And sadly, some of the blue light services have got high suicide rates as well, So, it's scary stuff. So we should be mindful of what people are being exposed to, and I'll go back to the COVID piece, the nurses, the staff, what they witnessed, and then the bit afterwards, we haven't got through this yet. There's people still out there suffering and struggling with their mental health, and they need that support. They need that arm around them. And sadly, the services aren't around to help and support us. And there's a grey space. There's an immediate. We're really good at the immediate trauma. Someone's going to jump off the bridge, and getting the emergency services there and getting the help straight away. But it's the grey space where someone's contemplating, and where do we get the help for that person? We put them into A&E, they get assessed, and they come back out. So it's scary. Yeah. Okay.
No, I understand. No, I completely get it, and I think it's what you're doing is really incredible. So,
thanks.
It's
my quest, to be honest. I said about that guy, the co-founder, my aim when I stood up to do my pitch to organisations was to promote a positive mental health culture and all that. His aim was to save lives. And I didn't realise until later on it was saving lives. So, and we are doing that. So, yeah. And there's other organisations doing that as well. So we've just got a great USP and deliver it in a good way, anyway.
And over your shoulder right now, we're going to take a little different tack.
Okay.
I can see over your shoulder your book. You're an author of a book. When you were a kid, did you ever think you'd write a book?
No, I didn't. No, I'm blown away. I mean, I've done a degree. I've done some paramedic training and stuff like that, and a lot of ninja training, to say the least. But writing that book was, I thought it'd be therapeutic. It was therapeutic, but it was also an absolute, I'm going to say, lick. Okay, 5 years it took trying to write one around, the busy lifestyle, juggling work life. It's been horrendous. I haven't got a literary agent. I've done this from the ground upwards. I've raised money through Kickstarter, crowdfunding, which was hard in itself. But people, their generosity, if they're listening, I was blown away. So I'm really appreciative. There's some good people out there. And they gave me some money to do this, and it was about documenting what we saw on ice out in the North Pole. And that's what this book is about. But it's also about the South Pole, the North Pole, and people reaching their own poles, get to their own goals and in the face of adversity and resilience. So I hate doing things for myself. It's more for charity, and all that good stuff. So there's a lot in that book. It got a bit spaghetti bolognese, dare I say it, where it got mixed in with mental resilience, mental health, pole exploration, military. There's a bit of everything in there for everyone. Climate change is a big one in there. I've got a climate scientist. And then I realized as I traveled through it, I tried to de-spaghettyize it. And so there's bits still left in there, some juicy bits. And there's even bits in there about the Russians, which is very interesting. So, yeah.
Well, we should mention the name of the book. It's called Plan D, When Things Don't Go to Plan.
Yeah.
And so you said that was because you were going... Well, we should also mention the fact that, just a small little fact about you, that you've walked to the South Pole and you've walked to the North Pole. Which one did you do first?
Well, I walked to the South Pole, but there's 5 different poles, by the way. People say they've been to the pole. I'm not belittling that, but geographic pole, South Pole, North Pole is the key one. You know, I mean, for any polar explorer out there, that you go from a coastline to that point, it's recognised. You know what I mean? And it's either supported or unsupported. You know, if you're supported, you obviously have all, you know, people to drop off, resupply. I do try and do them unsupported, where I've got no help whatsoever. I'm just man-hauling my sledge. So the South Pole was in the footsteps of Captain Scott, you know, and that was 76 days. You know, it was the centenary of Scott and Amundsen getting there, and that was an absolute. I mean, going from selection to seeing the enemy to, you know, going to the South. The South Pole was the hardest thing I've done in my life. I'll admit that here on the radio on this podcast. You know, that's how old's that? That proves my age there, doesn't it?
Radio's got a nice ring to it, though.
Yeah,
got my radio station.
But it was an absolute. It was hard, that, you know what I mean. So that was a success. We did it, and I thought it was a mission impossible, but we managed to get there on the 17th of January, same day as Captain Scott, 100 years. You know, there's a lot of history in that. It's in the book, by the way. But it was amazing. That was a success. But how we learn things, and we learn things from, you know, the background I come from, is through our lessons learned. And the North Pole, I thought coming back from the South Pole, I could go to the North Pole. I could do it in a year, no problems. But sadly, it didn't quite go to plan, hence Plan D. And we made the best of a really bad situation with what we were being thrown at, and that was the Russians. We had a death of someone, and it was just, you know, a whole testing our mental health and stuff to try and get there and do it, you know. And we ended up with, I mean, read the book. I think you decide whether it's a failure or a success. You know, it didn't go to plan, sadly, but that's why I wrote the book, is that we can learn from that.
Well, we got indoctrinated into ourselves in the army that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, which translated was, as Mike Tyson thinks it said it even better. He said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's pretty much what your book is about, right?
Yeah,
You were telling me before. Sorry.
No, I mentioned that, actually. I do mention no plan survives contact. So we had the best laid plans, but it kind of didn't go to plan. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, because you were telling me before that, so it took you 76 days.
The South Pole, yeah.
Yeah, and there was 3 of you. Mm. And your sleds were 160 kilometers, 160 kilograms each.
Yeah.
So you had one of these. That's about 350 pounds in old weight. And I didn't realize that just how high up the Antarctic plateau was. Yeah.
It's a good point. That's why it was a bit of a mission impossible, to be honest. You know, Scott and Amundsen, back in the day, you know, Amundsen had dogs and sledges, and he got there. He did savage his dogs. Read The Journey; it's amazing. And Scott had some ponies, and he did it. But he liked the old man hauling, and you know, with a treaty nowadays, we can't take any animals or anything on there anymore. So it's the good old-fashioned man hauling, and we got dropped off the same points as Amundsen and kind of Scott. 2 teams, by the way, 2 teams of 3, and we did a kind of race. Although we wouldn't call it a race, it was more like memorialising the footsteps of Captain Scott. It was amazing, you know, thing. But that weight, it was a shock for us. 160 kg. I mean, that's 2 of me, and it was like having the devil on your back and dragging that. And I literally thought that I could set my compass. How naive is this, by the way? Set my compass to south and march on that, and then I'll be at the South Pole, you know, no problems. But it wasn't like that. I got around the corner from Captain Scott's hut, which was the best campsite in the world, I have to say. I was blown away. It was like Christmas Day. Got around the corner anyway. And next thing, there's hills, you know, you're climbing 10,000 feet. It's ups and downs. There's crevasses, big holes in the ground. And I'd call them leg eaters, where they'd swallow your leg, man eaters, where they could swallow a whole person, or bus eater, where they'd swallow a whole kind of double-decker bus. They were massive, you know. So you had to watch. And these were hidden, these crevasses, you know, by a thin layer of snow. So you could just fall through them, you know. So it was a huge scary time for just 3 guys trekking. And this, I mean, Antarctica is twice the size of Australia, and the area which we were in was the size of France, and literally no one could hear you scream, I suppose. It's a great white silence, they call it, and it's scary.
And so were you guys roped together in the teams of 3?
Yeah, we'd be, because if the threat was high, especially on the glacier, we'd be roped up, and we'd rope up, if that threat was there. And actually wearing skis helps, rather than just walking, because you just fall through a crevasse. Skis would actually give you we have treaded over quite a few. You become quite exposed. Scott talks about it, by the way, how he kind of enjoyed the adrenaline of walking and the feeling maybe he might fall down. So you become acclimatized to your environment. And I think that's the key thing, and become more resilient,
Because, let's face it, if you're going across a crevasse, let's say you weigh 80 kilograms, which is kind of a standard weight for a man.
Yeah.
You get over that crevasse, which has the thin covering of snow, but that 160 kilogram sled, that could go through, and you could get dragged down with it.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking about the ropes. I guess.
Well, no, it's something. It's a really good point. It's something we didn't factor. My background is mountain troop, so I learned some great skills in mountain troop. Obviously, initially I was rope dyslexic coming from the infantry, so my instructor told me. But I learnt, and that's the ethos of that unit, was the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, was to keep trying and practicing. I went to my room with a short piece of rope and practiced these knots. You're wondering where this is going to, I bet. But hence, the guys looked at me, being the mountain troop, I should be the expert in knowing what to do if we fall down a crevasse. So I laid on some training, the crevasse training, which is pretty straightforward. But what about the pulks? You're totally right. So we would tie them together, and we'd have a Klemheist knot, which is a special locking knot, where if you fell down, it would lock, and it would prevent, because you're all tied up, prevent that pulk from coming down after it, or the sledge coming down on top of you afterwards. So I had to do all that training. I had to learn that and teach the guys that piece. So, yeah.
Well, actually, the guy who introduced us, Mark Wood, who we had on the last podcast, or a recent podcast, and purely by coincidence that you served with a guy called Lindsay Bruce, who was on the podcast not so long ago, and Ed Holm, who's coming on again soon.
Familiar
names. Yeah. What are the chances? Actually, going back to the mental health aspect, that's one of the subjects that Ed and I are going to talk about, because he had he had some mental problems, shall we say, which he'll talk about. I'm not talking out of turn. He talks about that in his own podcast. Yeah. And that podcast we had.
I think that's a really important point, because regardless of who you are, your background, it can affect any one of us. So I'll listen avidly for no pressure to Ed's podcast. It'll be really interesting, I reckon. So
yeah, he's coming on. I think we're going to try and do it next week for sure. Now we've got some. I think it's going to be a good one. I think people will like that one. So then you did the South, but we're kind of skirting over it a little bit. It's obviously going to be a huge story.
Yeah.
And then you went to do the North Pole, which is what the book became more about, because you had a lot of setbacks and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit what was going on there?
Yeah, well, I kind of alluded to it. I thought, we raised quite a bit of money for the South Pole. It wasn't just me, it was the team, It was led by a guy called Henry Worsley, and a legend, a polar legend. If no one's heard about him, please have a look, because you hear of some great explorers, but he was amazing. And actually, I think Netflix are bringing out a film on him shortly. But he led that expedition, and credit to him, amazing guy. But sadly, he passed away as we were doing the North Pole. He was our patron, and a good friend and colleague, and that was a death, sadly. And it devastated us as a team as we travelled through. I thought that we could come back and just bounce the North Pole, but actually there are totally different environments and places. Whereas Antarctica, it's a landmass, whereas the Arctic Ocean is a sea. So, it's about, I don't know, it's just a thin sea ice. So you have to adjust your kit and equipment. And the lessons we learned down south, we kind of took up north. I knew as a team we could do it, no problems. You know what I mean? We had to adjust our kit. So, for example, our sledges had to float. We had to wear dry bags, to get through because it's melting. That's what our actual mission was, to go and document what we saw on ice, because we wanted to see and witness it. A bit like, on a military operation, we go behind enemy lines as such, and we do a battle damage assessment and report back. That's kind of what we were doing with this story. I'm saying story, my book, Plan D is that record of that, and this was back in 2016. So it's taken me, a few years to write it, but it's worth the read, because what we are witnessing now, and I'm not a climate scientist, but there is one in the book, was scary up there. And it really scared us, these manly macho guys walking, but it was really horrible good training environment. But I couldn't wait to get out of there. I mean, there's just huge areas of water. It's really dodgy, big gaps, there's not crevasses there, but there's gaps with water, and that's the Arctic Ocean, so yeah, I mean, that's what the book's about, is trying to get there. But we were faced with Plan A initially. Was when we came back from the South Pole, Plan A was to go from Canada to the geographic North Pole, but because of the fragility of the ice, the Canadians, the company called Kemboric Air, kind of said, no, we can't do this. It's too dangerous. We're losing planes, and there's no one coming to do this, so no business. See you later. So that was Plan A out in the first year. And then we went actually in a hotel. We laid out the map, and we did our little kind of combat estimate, we would call it, and looked at the map and looked at our COAs, our courses of action, and we decided, actually, let's go from Russia, and there is routes from Russia, a place called Cape Archetsky, to go to. I even said that in a nearly Russian sound then, didn't I? Yeah, very good. I was impressed that to the geographic North Pole from that side, and that was a goer. And we got a company involved called Vicar. There's no relationship there, by the way. And they took some money, as the Russians do, and they promised that they could get us in and all that. This was in the first 2 years. We're trying to get money as well. Sponsorship is a big thing, by the way. And don't think you can just go to these places and do it. You need to raise a lot of money. And we had to raise, about £600,000 for the South Pole, and for the North Pole was about £300,000. You know what I mean? Where do we get that money from? People got to believe in us. So I thought we could tap our old sponsors and get them. Nah, the doors were closing on us. So that was a problem as well. That was running through things, and also the route in. So we were going from Russia. Plan B was the Russians, but the Russians closed the doors in the last part of the year. In 2015, just before we were going, they said no, and it was the UK-Russian political situation with Litvinenko, the poisonings, that they refused our visas, and we weren't allowed in the country. So we had the money at that stage, the green light for the money, but they refused. So, oh my word, we were stuck. And our sponsors were expecting us to go, and we couldn't go. So it wasn't until we had an opportunity. And when I said about sliding doors earlier, I suppose we're bringing things together here. We went to Henry. Sadly passed away doing something. He was in the footsteps of Shackleton. Something that was his legend, and that's what he went off and did when he left the military. And sadly, he passed away doing that. And that horrible news hit us, as I said, the ripple effect of that. So we went to his funeral, and at that funeral created a huge opportunity for us as well, where we met someone. So from a horrible negative, here's a positive. We met someone and they said, we can get you in. We can support you. We'll speak to the Canadians again. And reinvent. I know who you are. You can do this. Because we weren't known. And that's the key thing in that area. If you're not a known explorer, who are you? No, you're not going to be any good. You were too much of a risk. So, of course, no one knows us because of our backgrounds. So it's devil's, it's horrible. But anyway, so he went to the Canadians and spoke to the Canadians, and the Canadians agreed. And they said, if you go from the North Pole back to the Canadian coastline, then we'll do it. And we went, yes, we'll take anything. And that was called Plan C. So we now fly into the closest place is Spitsbergen, Norway. And who's in control there? The Russians. So even though it's Norway, the Russians are the logistics experts there. And it was the Russians who fly you into a place called Borneo. It's their own ice pole airport. And they lay out the runway on ice, flying their planes. It's not that easy, by the way. It takes about a week they have to parachute in and get a bulldozer in and all that. And it takes about a week to set up. So we were in their hands at the end of the day. And that was plan C. And then from there, we were going to walk to, Canada. It all sounds crazy, doesn't it? And then we were going to link in with the Canadians after the last 3 degrees. Anyway, we got there, 1st of April. What happened? The Russians turned around and said, the runway's cracked. We can't get you in. So they had to find another runway, another week. So it's adding time on now. There's other rumblings of other things, military operations happening as well at the same time, Russians. And I thought I'd get that one in there. But so it was a bit of a struggle. So we had a lot of anxiety as a team, a lot of frustrations. We were training. We had cabin fever because we're stuck there. We can't get in. And we're waiting for the Russians. But I wasn't too sure whether to believe them or not half the time with what was happening. Anyway, the runway was cracked, or so they said. And then we waited, and then the runway cracked again. So it put another week on, which is devastating news. And basically the end of that expedition, really. We couldn't get to Canada in time. So what do you do as a team? Do you go back on the plane holding your head down low, or do you go back to your mission statement, which was what you documented, what we saw on ice? We go back to that, and that's what we did. And I went back to the Russians and I said, hey, at least get us on the ice, can you? Drop us as far away as possible. We'll walk, we'll fly the flag and all that good stuff, and we can still document what we saw on ice. And that's what we did, and that's plan D. In some.
Well, I've got a question for you. How do you get a bulldozer to the North Pole? And number 2, how do you stop it cracking the runway, for instance? I mean, if it's only 2 to 3 meters thick, surely a bulldozer is going to go through that, no?
Yeah, they're very clever. They select the area. They got a good idea. They've been doing this for years, by the way. And what they do is they fly from Russia. They parachute their team in. They make sure the runway is safe and it's thick enough. They then land the plane in. They then get the bulldozer off, which does take the weight because it's compressed and all that business. You know what I mean? So, and then that's how they do it. So it's quite clever. There was a Channel 4 film about that, actually, a documentary. It was quite interesting.
I mean, that sounds like a hell of a good job, getting parachuted onto the ice and then setting up a runway and stuff. That sounds like the job for you, Paul. It
sounds familiar, to be honest. It sounds familiar to the community which I came from, yeah. It's bread and butter, So, interesting.
So how did you actually make it then? So did it make your journey longer, or did you just get on there and crack on anyway?
We just got on there in the end. We did all this training. I knew as a team, as soon as we got on there, we were like an express train. Just getting through, but the Russians kept giving us a load of stress all the time. Get here at this time and that, the weather's coming in, and we just, focused on the task in hand and got there and did it. Yeah.
And so was it the same team of 3 that did the South Pole that did the North Pole? No,
it was. It's a bit of a long. I like working in 3s, by the way, because there's redundancy. As well, in a tent it might be a bit cramped, 3 of you in a tent, but 3 of you it gives you a breather. If you're at the front, you work like a caterpillar, one guy at the front, he's concentrating on the route. The next guy, he's following behind, and the other guy behind is just chilling out. You know what I mean? You can listen to some music, and then you just swap around. So it's a kind of caterpillar kind of effect to get there. But I've just gone off on a tangent.
No, it's different. I was wondering if you had the same team.
The team. That's a good point. Yeah. So the team, I had 2 original guys, well, myself and another guy, and then we went and spoke with. Funny old thing. Went up and saw Mark Wood, that person you spoke about, because he had been there before, and I wanted to get some ground truth. The key thing is always preparing, not only physically but prepare yourself for that environment, get an understanding. So we were going to see this guy, Mark Wood, to find out what it's all about. It just so happens when we got there, brilliant bloke, doing all the education piece. I was blown away, had a good chat with him. he gave us great information and then said, "Can I be part of your team?" And I went, we thought about it. And actually, yes, okay, because from our discrete backgrounds, we couldn't put our heads above the parapet and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing." We'd use him as our ugly face of the expedition. Sorry, Mark. And that's what we kind of did. But sadly, the guy who I was with, he pulled out because we weren't making that first year. Like I said, we weren't getting any money. It was quite demoralizing. I've skimmed through this quite quickly. It was pretty horrible when you want to try and achieve your goal and you're getting all these setbacks all the time, and people bail out. And that's what that guy did, to go and do something else. Good on him. But that left us, the two amigos. I like the three amigos. So we had a soiree at my house. Sounds a bit posh, that, doesn't it? On the 17th of January. 17th of January is a key date, isn't it? It got to the South Pole. And we had a glass of wine or two or three with the old original team. Mark, who was on the team, I asked him in the back, smoking our pipes, and said, "Do you want to come on board?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll call you tomorrow as well, just to double check that this is it." And he said yes. And so it was Mark Wood and myself and Mark. We were on the Three Amigos. That was it. Yeah.
Never ceases to amaze me, these things. I mean, what would you say? What is driving you to do these things? I mean, number one, going into the SAS, that's the selection process. Lindsay Bruce mentioned it. He went into a little bit of detail, not detail, but he explained how hard it is, and that's a very, very driven, very focused individual. And then you do that. Then you spend 22 years in the SAS doing stuff that we can't talk about, but perilous, life-threatening situations, extremely hard. And then you go, after all that, you think you might want to put your feet up and get your pipe out that you want, but no, you take the pipe with you to the South Pole and then the North Pole. What do you reckon's driving you on?
It's a good question.
You seem very normal.
Oh, thanks. I am.
I mean, no, I know you are. You're a very normal guy, but
I'm only human. I'm human. I've done some, like I said, done some extraordinary things. I'm lucky, but I've going back to the selection process, there was people there who were a lot bigger, a lot fitter, stronger than me, and but they didn't have the drive. They didn't have the hunger, and they dropped by their wayside, and you see that, and I don't, that drive, I think, is maybe part hereditary, part of my genes. There's something there. I really strongly believe, but I also believe by how I've been my previous unit, going back to the light infantry, that was the foundation. Then the other unit is put a layer of resilience, layer of body armor, Kevlar on me to drive me. And then you've got the values and ethos of these organizations that drive you to do these great things. As I mentioned, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, and that is a very powerful to keep going. Even if your legs hanging off, whatever, you're going to still achieve your aim. And so there's a very positive side to that, but there's also I think a negative side to that as well, by the way, just on burnout, going to mental health, by the way. I could see you're thinking that. But that's kind of what driven me, and I've done some amazing things. I've just used the same kind of model, and this is what I talk about in some of my talks, the same model that has worked, and it's good preparation, good holistic preparation, not only physically, like I said, but theoretically as well. And that drive, when all things, I always look back and just go, I've been in worse situations, you know what I mean? And even in the South Pole, it was horrible. And I thought, well, and we spoke about this on the ice, and it was absolutely horrendous. I can't explain it really, but
and that's saying something coming from a man of your background to say that this was horrible, the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, that is unthinkable to the normal guy, and I'm talking about myself here. What is it going to take that nearly makes you quit?
Well, it's just the drive to keep going. It's even at the end of a really hard day, we'd say one for the Queen, and we'd tap our ski poles and do an extra kilometre for the Queen. Even when we were knackered, So what drives us to do that? It's in us. You know, it's our belief, it's our values, it's what's locked in us to keep going regardless. Even if it's the journey sometimes to get there. But having the confidence that I've done my best I can, and I think that's what's driven me, is I do the best I can, and sometimes that has got negatives as well, as you can understand. Yeah,
I can imagine, but. How do I say this? Do you, and it's going to sound a bit trite, and I'm not trying to come across like sounding all Hollywood or anything like that. I don't mean it like this, but could anyone do it? Do you think it's possible it's in all of us to be able to do these kind of things?
I think the opportunities are open for everyone to do it, whether they've got it, you know. And you can go back to the selection analogy, you know, these big guys, and you see them drop by the wayside. So what is it that drives us to do these things? You know, you hear, you know, I think Hillary, why do you do these things? Because it's there. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if you could bottle that bit of success. You know, that's what I've always, when I was, you know, in that team, someone came along to try and bottle that bit, and you just can't. It's so, I don't know, liquidized. I don't know. It's so complex. It comes from all different areas to keep us going. But hunger, good preparation, and the motivation to keep doing it. I mean, one for me is a fear of failure, you know, and I think that's a very powerful. You've got to step into that arena and drive yourself. You know, you don't know otherwise, but just give it a go. And the fear of failure keeps you going. You know what I mean? People might want you to fail, and that drives you even more. You know, people want to see you have a fall. Sadly, they do. You know, and so that's going to drive me even more. I'm going to keep going even more now. You know, so it's a difficult one to bottle. We've all got it in different, so we can all do it. The opportunities are there. It's great. What I would say is prepare as best as you can, and do your best. That's all you can do.
So if I was a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever they are, when you said I'm driven by the fear of failure, where does that, why, where does that come from?
I don't know. I just...
Well, okay, let me put it another way. When you, let's say you got to the South Pole, the hardest thing you've ever done, when you got there, how did you feel at the end? Were you euphoric? Were you doing cartwheels, high-fiving each other? Or was it you got there and went, all right, we've done it, and then I guess we're going back now?
It was kind of the latter one. So what
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah,
because the weird thing is it's not getting to the goal per se. It's the journey it takes to get there, you know. And it was really the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks before we were getting there. That's when all our emotions came out. Was before we got to the pole. That's when, as a team, we were quite emotional, drained, and the emotions were there. It was great that we had achieved it, but actually the feeling of accomplishment was more as we were doing it, if that makes sense. But it's great that we've achieved it. I mean, it's amazing, you know, but there wasn't high fives. Yeah, we had a glass of champagne, you know, and stuff. And yeah, great. But just remember, it's the journey it takes to get there, I think.
Good memories and good stories.
Yeah.
I kind of knew you were going to say that. I've you know, whenever it's always a thing when you do something difficult and you think, you know, milestones in your life that you do something meaningful, which is hard work, and you finish it and you think, I thought I was going to feel a lot better about myself. Now, what's the next challenge? And then I guess you just roll into the next one, right?
Yeah.
It's a strange thing. Human beings are strange creatures, aren't they?
We are. I mean, resilient. We are. The ability to bounce back, and the pain. I cannot explain the pain because it goes back to, you know, you've got to use coping strategies, very clever coping strategies to distract yourself, pulling that pulk, that weight. And we've all got our own individual coping strategies. You know, for example, is drifting ourselves to a different place. You know what I mean? I used to think that I had my dog beside me, or I was in St. Lucia or somewhere warmer when it was cold, you know. So these are powerful coping strategies which are locked inside me. I can use and utilize. to help me to get there. But where was I now? I've gone off.
No, I think you've answered it fine. I guess people are going to want to know this. How old were you when you actually did the South Pole?
That's a good question, actually. It was 2011, 2012. So
10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. So 40.
So you did it when you were 40. The hardest thing you've ever done.
Yeah, give my age away now.
Yeah, but you must have been in tip-top shape. So you're pretty much my age.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Oh my God.
But that goes down to training, and keeping yourself fit. I mean, I was at the gym this morning, 6:30 there, keeping the old heart. It never gets any easier. That's always my saying. It never gets any easier. You just got to keep going, and do the best you can.
Well, you look brilliant. I mean, you look very healthy. Looking in good shape. You're looking very smooth.
Oh, right, of course. Thanks. I'll pay you later.
All right, yeah. Okay, so just before we're going to wrap up, let's talk a little. I'd like you to tell us about where people can find you and your websites and etc., that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I've got two kind of businesses or websites. I've got my Excalibur Mental Health. That is just under X-Caliber. www.x-caliber.co.uk. Anyway, it's Excalibur. That's there, and that's the same in LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn, but also I've got my paulvicary.com. That's my website where I do my mental fitness coaching. My book piece is there as well. And you can get my book. It is on Amazon, but I would recommend going through the publisher wordsbydesign.co.uk. And it's in the shop there, and it's £15, but £1, like I said, I don't like doing nothing for charity, so I'm giving £1 to charity, which is obviously Help for Heroes, because I'm working for them. So please, buy the book. That includes you.
I will be buying it. I will be buying that. And like I said, I want you to sign it. I'm going to try and get everyone who writes a book, I'm going to try and get them to sign it and send it back to me so I can pass them on to my kids.
That'd be great.
To prove that I've met these people.
Yeah, brilliant.
Even though it's virtual. So let me just get this one right. So it's X-CALIBRE.
Yes.
.co.uk, sorry.
Yeah.
And then Paul Vicary is PAULVICARY.com.
Yeah.
And you're on, and you can, both of those
I'm on
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on, that's for both companies as well. It's Excalibur Mental Health, by the way. So I've branded it Mental Health. So it's not just Excalibur.
Okay. Excalibur Mental Health.
As you can tell, I'm a social kind of media biff. So, but it's all there. You know what I mean? So give us a shout, look us up. Yeah. You should
get yourself on Instagram. And the reason I mention this is because Lindsay Bruce has a sizable following for what he's doing. Really? I think he's got over 10,000 people, maybe more.
Wow.
So, it's something, for you to bring.
Yeah, it's funny. I am looking at that. So thanks for,
Have a chat with him.
Yeah.
And one more time, what was it, the motto of the mountain troop? You said something about the pursuit of excellence, the unrelenting.
It's not just mountain troop. It's a unit, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence.
The unrelenting pursuit of excellence. I like that. It's got a nice roll. Get a T-shirt. You should get T-shirts made of that and sell them.
You've given it away now, haven't you? Hey? No, that'd be. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on, mate. That was tremendous. Second time's the charm and all that kind of stuff. Can't thank you enough. Just to take the time and come on and speak to us, and just a really fascinating story. And your book sounds amazing. And I also would like to, on behalf of a lot of the military guys will be listening to this, thanks for the mental health work you're doing, because there's a lot of guys I personally know a lot of guys who are and have struggled with these things. So Paul Vicary, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And we'll have to get you on again soon. And whatever your next challenge is, you have to come back on and tell us about it. Will do. Okay, and if you're listening, thank you very much. And you can find us on Mr. Kindness _pod on Instagram. All right, take care. Bye-bye.